The stars went out on a Tuesday. One moment, the night sky was a quilt of familiar light. Orion's belt strung across the dark, Cassiopeia's crooked chair, the Milky Way, a silver river spilling from horizon to horizon. Lovers pointed upward. Children traced lines against bedroom windows. Sailors glanced at Polaris with the calm assurance of centuries. Entire cultures clung to stories stitched into those constellations like family names. And then, one by one, they began to die. Not with a bang, not with meteor screams or auroral curtains, just silence. A shimmer like heat haze swallowed the first cluster, then another. Whole constellations wavered, as if seen through tears, and vanished into black. The sky grew bald. The silver river dried up. The universe turned its face and refused to be seen. Cities screamed in disbelief as much as terror. In Buenos Aires, Tango partners froze mid-step, eyes pulled skyward as Orion winked out. In Nairobi, market lanterns seemed suddenly too bright, their domestic glow mocking the blank vault overhead. In San Francisco, a boy pushed his nose to a fog-chilled window and whispered too loudly, "Where did they go?" In Mecca, the pilgrim crowd's murmur fell into a void deeper than prayer. On the Outback's red flats, an old woman kept telling her granddaughter where the emu in the sky should be, tracing absence with a trembling finger. Telescopes confirmed what the naked eye feared. The light wasn't gone. It was veiled, bent and strangled by a geometry so cruelly elegant it made physicists swear. It was like a film of perfect black poured over the heavens, orbiting beacons, spidery constructs of alloy and arrogance, lit Earth's upper air with a new symbol, a wheel of gold circling a void of black, the sigil of the Galactic Empire, and with it, the name of their new gospel, the Starveil Array, a lattice stretched across parsecs, invisible until it flared to life. Singular purpose, simple cruelty, erased the stars from any world that disobeyed. Navigation crippled. Morale shattered. Myth gutted. The night sky, humanity's oldest map and mirror, reduced to a uniform, jurisdictional dark. Alien officials across the spiral breathed the doctrine like incense. The humans are finished. No culture survives without its stars. They are too primitive, too chaotic, too tied to myth. On Earth, silence spread heavier than night. Observatories wept with data. Sailors marked the death of Polaris with a toast that tasted of salt and grief. Children stared at ceilings and tried to imagine what no story could restore. Musicians, poets, pilots, preachers, each tried to hold a piece of the broken sky and found their hands closing on air. The Empire's message followed, pouring through every speaker and screen on Earth, tiled atop the gold and void crest. Humanity, chaos ends tonight. Order is kindness. Kneel. Kindness. As if amputation could be a favor. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, victory was measured not in lives, but in decibels of silence. Delegates gathered beneath a vault of polished black. Scaled envoys with mirrored eyes, insectoid ministers whose antennae twitched in metronomic pride, gas breathers sealed inside chambers that sighed with pressure and smugness. The Empire's crest loomed above them, a gilded crown around a wound. A counselor with translucent fins lifted his voice, its edges wet with satisfaction. The array functions as predicted. 100 worlds quelled with a switch. Humanity will kneel. Without stars, they are blind. Without stars, they are nothing. Agreement followed like a choir trained to obey. Mandibles clicked. Crystalline chords chimed. Pressure seals hissed approval. The Citadel glowed in its own reflection, confident that no one would dare contradict the liturgy of inevitability. Until the doors at the far end hissed open, the sound of her heels hit first, sharp, unapologetic. Gunfire measured into rhythm. Heads turned, first because of the sound, then because of the woman who walked with it like she'd invented the beat. She came in like a painting you could hear. Luna Starflare. Blonde hair in glamorous victory rolls, luminous even beneath the citadel's austere lights. The familiar cat-eye goggles, tinted lenses set in chrome frames, rested high on her curls like a crown she could fly. Pearls traced her throat in soft defiance. A black pencil skirt skimmed her hips with scandalous precision. A crisp blouse and tailored jacket cut to retro angles framed her as both starlet and ace. Her gloves were cream, impractically immaculate. The cigarette holder in her right hand, black lacquer with a blood-red tip, drew a serpentine line of smoke as if she were writing her name in the air. Her mouth wore a smirk calibrated to infuriate emperors. The council's floor vibrated with disapproval. A crystalline dignitary chimed a complaint that translated roughly as, "Strike this human from the record." A mantled amphibian slapped his tail against the marble and croaked, "This chamber is closed to performance." Luna's heels clicked to a halt at center. She lifted her chin, let her gaze roam the projected void where stars should have burned, and smiled like a thief inspecting a vault. She drew on her cigarette, exhaled a long, perfect ribbon of smoke toward that manufactured nothing. Her voice fell like a velvet blade. "When you cut our stars," she said, each syllable lazy as a cat's stretch, "you only gave us a blank canvas." The line hit like a thunderclap that refused to echo. The room gasped. Somewhere, a recorder's light flared. The chamber's proceedings were public by law, and the law had just turned against its authors. "You mock the council," hissed a diplomat with silver mandibles. "Yes, darling," Luna replied, eyes alight. "Of course I do. You're the sort who mistakes subtraction for victory. Erase a sky and call it order. Pull down our constellations and call it kindness. But all you've done is give my people room to paint." A sound like a laugh tripped through the chamber before it remembered itself and died. Luna caught the dying ghost of it and fed it with her smile. She pivoted on a stiletto, clean, effortless, practiced, and strolled along the dais, her cigarette holder describing arcs like a conductor's baton. "You imagine we need stars to navigate," she said. "We learn direction from birds that fly by scent and street corners that taste like home. You imagine we need myths to dream. We built theaters in basements during blackouts and sang in languages that didn't exist before the song demanded them. You think pulling down the night will make us meek." She leaned close to an amphibian delegate, smoke curling under his gills like perfume. "Darling, humans invented disco balls. We never needed the heavens to shine. We make our own light." "Arrogance!" snapped a pressure-bound envoy, the sound warped by valves. "No species rises once the stars are veiled." The historical record, Luna cut in. A giggle cracking the formal air like glass, is a museum for those who gave up on being interesting. Empires count on history repeating. Humanity counts on breaking it. She sat on the edge of the central console like it was a bar stool, crossed her legs. The pearls at her throat slid, catching light. She blew a ring of smoke that drifted upward, pressed against the dome that projected sanitized darkness, and smeared like a thumbprint on God. For the first time, the presiding chancellor's voice wavered. "Human envoy," he intoned, metallic authority shaken. "You will cease this insolence. The array cannot be undone. Order is a kindness you will accept." "Kindness?" Luna echoed softly, tasting the word as if it were over-steeped tea. "Darling, your kindness is a cage hung with curtains. We prefer windows." The laugh she let out wasn't cruel. It was delighted. Genuinely pleased, the villain had said the quiet part out loud. Broadcast law made every syllable common property. On Earth, New Delhi rooftops, Kansas porches, Lagos nav hubs, a Reykjavik cafe where fishermen gathered to talk about currents and chance. Billions watched the human who refused to dim under their stolen night. On alien stations where ordinary citizens weren't as sure as their rulers, eyes widened at the insolence, then stayed wide for something harder to category: joy. Luna stood, her jacket's hem settling like a period at the end of a sentence. She walked back toward the doors. Halfway she stopped and looked over her shoulder. The smirk softened into something like promise. "You wanted us to kneel?" she said. "Darling, we're about to stand taller than you've ever dreamed." She flicked ash onto the polished floor. The embers skittered like a fallen star. She turned, heels measuring the room in bright, tiny verdicts, and let the doors hiss her exit like a whisper that couldn't help admiring her. On Earth, in Nairobi, the boy who'd asked, "Where did they go?" watched her on a jumbotron, her hair a halo, her mouth a dare. When Luna laughed, he laughed too. In Paris, couples kissed under a blank sky and believed they were still seen. In Mexico City, an old musician lifted his trumpet toward nothing and played anyway. In a coastal town in the Philippines, a woman strung fairy lights between two palms, stubborn as tide. In Houston, the flight lines burned with quiet fury. Navigators ran fingers over dead maps. Pilots pressed their foreheads to cockpit canopies like prayer. A message pinged every console at once, red lipsticked and impossible. "Rally at Umbra, LS." Umbra was a secret carved into rock, an old lunar dry dock cut during a war that children now thought was a story. Its cradle had held ghosts of ships older than any pilots still flying. Tonight it held a rumor that had chosen to wear heels. The approach corridor was a throat of steel. Luna's silhouette, pencil skirt swaying, pearls glimmering like captured moons, moved through it like a held note. She passed a line of maintenance drones, their lenses flicking to follow her, as if they were prey, and she the most interesting predator they had ever seen. At the end of the throat waited a ship, the Radiant Shadow. She was an antique interceptor refit until she purred like a verbal noun. Black hull with chrome filigree along stress lines, the way a dancer tapes silver along an old injury. The nose was sharp, the wings swept in a curve that suggested speed even in sleep. Lipstick graffiti, Luna's hand, arced across her flank in audacious red. "Look up." Luna paused and put her gloved hand to the hull. Ships were like animals. You had to greet them properly. The radiant skin hummed under her palm like a cat chest. "Time to paint the sky," Luna murmured. The ship's running lights blinked once. Consent. Conspiracy. Both. "Captain Starflare," said a voice behind her, careful with both halves of her name. Luna didn't turn at once. She let the title echo. Then she glanced back. A tall woman stood at parade rest, skin the color of oiled cedar, hair braided back, eyes like decisions. Her jacket bore the insignia of a navigator who'd sailed seas and skies both. "Commander Reyes," Luna said, amused warmth bending the syllables. "You got my invitation." "Hard not to, ma'am," Reyes said, then flushed at her own formality. Luna's tilt of eyebrow dared her to correct. Reyes did. "Luna." "That's better," Luna purred. "You still think in lines." "I think in routes," Reyes said. "And routes require stars." "Today they require nerve," Luna said. "Tomorrow they'll require fire." Other shadows separated from the hangar's darkness. A mechanic with engine grease tattooed beneath his nails. A communications savant whose earrings looked like they could pick up God. A medic with sleeves rolled to reveal a forearm of burn scar and bite marks from rescues no one wrote down. Old friends. New conspirators. The sort of people who collected around madness because it made more sense than the alternative. "Status?" Luna asked, twirling her cigarette holder as if it conducted the room. Reyes shrugged. "We can't see, but we can still shout. The array masks starlight in bands. It doesn't stop heat. Drones can feel if they can't see. We've got 12 survey skiffs, 94 microflares, 6 obsolete lighthouse buoys, and 3,000 angry civilians who would like to punch a constellation in the face." Luna's smile brightened by a half shade. 3,000 is a start. The mechanic scratched his cheek with a wrench because hands had to be doing something in her presence. You really gonna do it? The thing you said in the council feed? Paint new stars with fire? Luna asked. Darling, did you think I was rehearsing? He swallowed. Nodded. Reyes didn't swallow. She looked at the radiant shadow and saw a thing that wanted to be flown toward Adair. Tell us how, she said. Luna's scarlet mouth curved into a briefing. We can't turn off the array tonight. We can make it look foolish. All it does is rob sightlines. So we light things that refuse to be edited out. We seed the sky with false stars the array can't predict. Flares, buoys, beacons. We give every city a new Polaris tonight. We stitch our own river by morning. The comms savant pushed her goggles up. Pirate radio for astronomers. Star graffiti, Luna said, delighted. We light the unlightable and dare them to swat sparks while we build a bonfire. You'll draw fire, the medic warned softly. Luna looked at her. The pearls at her throat seemed to glow against the dark hanger. We're already under it. A junior tack, barely 20, raised a timid hand, as if she were still in a classroom. Luna pointed with her cigarette holder like a benediction. The girl blurted, What if the Empire wipes the flares as fast as we fire them? Then the galaxy gets a show, Luna said, and we make them sweat to keep the dark. Her laughter hung a second, then fell into the rhythm of work. Reyes began issuing orders. The mechanic kissed his wrench like a talisman and dove into a panel. The comms savant threaded a bouquet of illegal frequencies through a server like a thief braiding rope. The medic set out bandages like sacrament. Luna moved among them, not pacing, gliding. A hostess at a very exclusive, very illegal opening night. She touched shoulders with gloved fingertips, left courage like perfume on the air. Her heels clicked like punctuation. Her cat-eye goggles, still pushed up into her curls, flashed with the promise she'd brought to the council chamber. Try to make me small. Watch me take up the sky. Outside, the black that had replaced the night pressed down on craters and cities alike. Earth's oceans muttered their discontent to shore. Pilots eyed dead firmaments and ran checklists by muscle memory. Grandmothers told stories with their eyes closed, using memory as sextant and love as latitude. A feed burst to life without permission, the council session on every screen again, Luna's entrance replayed from a dozen angles. The boy in Nairobi saw her laugh. The woman in Reykjavik poured coffee for sailors who found themselves smiling for a reason they couldn't name. In a cramped apartment in Guangzhou, a welder closed her eyes and saw the shape of Orion inside her skull like a neon skeleton and whispered, "Paint him." Back in Umbra, Reyes's voice cut through the hangar. Teams set, drones loaded, buoys primed, microflares hot. Your call, Luna. Luna Starflare stepped onto the Radiant Shadows boarding ladder. She looked like trouble in taste. Blonde waves, perfect. Red lipstick, a signature as loud as a siren and as precise as a compass. Pearls cool against her skin. Cat-eye goggles slid down with a practiced flick, lenses catching the hangar lights until it seemed she had bottled the last stars left in the universe and worn them over her eyes. Put me on, she said. On what? The comms savant asked. Not because she didn't know, but because it felt good to hear Luna say it. Everything that listens, Luna purred. Static coughed. Signals bent. Frequencies that had never met shook hands like conspirators. And then her voice, silk over steel, moved through Earth's rooms and halls and hearts, and out across stations where aliens pretended not to lean closer. Humanity, Luna said, and the word carried old music. They cut our stars, we will paint new ones with fire. She let the line hang long enough for disbelief to blink. Then she smiled, and somehow the smile traveled with the voice. You think we can't navigate without Polaris? Darling, we nailed latitude with shadows, longitude with watches, and hope with worse odds than this. You think we can't dream without Orion? Please. We told stories in caves with hands dipped in ash, The sky has always been a mirror. If they stole the mirror, then look at us. We shine. She tipped her head toward the recording rig as if it were a person in need of flirting. To the miners with lamps, to the night shift nurses and the dock hands and the kids still awake because the dark is too loud. Come to your windows. Tonight you will see light move like a dare. The comms savant mouthed the words along, as if etching them onto her molars. Reyes's jaw unclenched for the first time since the stars died. The mechanic sniffed and told anyone nearby it was fumes. Luna climbed into the radiant shadow's cockpit with the grace of a cat burglar and the surety of a queen. The seat kissed her spine. The harness crossed her blouse like a sash bestowed by a war that chose its generals for style as well as ruthlessness. Her gloves wrapped the throttle and stick like secrets. Inside the canopy's curve, her reflection looked back. Blonde rolls, cat eyes, red mouth. The goggles reflected the hangar and a scatter of gala lights. She smirked at herself. A woman should be her own audience before she played to the room. "Open hangar," she said, and the doors peeled apart like stage curtains drawn by invisible hands. Vacuum kissed the deck. The radiant shadow purred deeper, a low growl of appetite. Stars did not appear beyond, only the suffocating velvet of the array's blank. It didn't matter. "Flight," Reyes said in her ear, voice steady as a lighthouse keeper. "Umbra control to radiant. You are go to paint." "Copy," Luna said, each consonant crisp enough to be kept as a souvenir. "Brush to canvas," she lifted off. The radiant shadow slid from the cradle and into a night that pretended to be empty. The lunar horizon cut a knife smile against the black. In Earth orbit, dead satellites glinted like tired fish. The array's veil drank light and offered no reflection. Fine. Some audiences needed warming up. Luna flipped the first bank of switches with the same flourish she used to flip a compact mirror. "Drone Bay 1, release!" 12 survey skiffs peeled from her belly like swallows leaving eaves. They carried flare spheres and hooked feet, and attitudes that suggested mischief. Her calm savant whistled into the line, and the drones answered with cheerful pings. "Go, my little vandals," Luna said. "Draw me a Big Dipper I can sip from." "Targets?" Reyes asked. "Old friends," Luna said. "Wherever the array thinks it's safest." The drones streaked outward in arcs plotted on math and nerve. Under the veil, their flares were invisible until they weren't, until chemistry met arrogance and burned. A first sphere blossomed like a small sun and hung, impossible, defiant. A second answered. A third made a line that any human recognizing instinct more ancient than language named. On rooftops and beaches, faces lifted. In Nairobi, the boy pointed and didn't ask where this time. He shouted, "There!" In Buenos Aires, a woman who had danced tango under Orion pressed a hand to her heart and laughed like a release valve opening. In a small boat in the North Sea, a pair of fisherfolk swore at the air and then grinned, and then the older of the two cried. The array responded. Patches of the veil thickened, the dark itself seeming to snarl. A beam like a surgeon's eraser stabbed at the first flare and smothered it. The second guttered under a smothering algorithm. The third flared brighter for a heartbeat like a last word shouted through a closing door and then died. "Paint faster," Luna said. "Make them sweat." The radiant shadow rolled. Her lipstick left a fingerprint on the throttle. She flipped open a panel and pressed a button marked in her own hand with lipstick red letters. "Sparkle!" Microflares coughed from her wingtips and scattered like a handful of sequins tossed across a dance floor. The array moved to swallow glitter and found itself trying to drink a waterfall. "Umbra control," Reyes said through a laugh she hadn't planned. Secondary buoys set. Old lighthouse buoys. Heavy, stubborn, built before the Empire had a name, lit one by one in orbit. They had been meant to warn ships away from debris fields. Tonight they announced a planet's refusal to dim. "Let them come," Luna murmured. "Let them spend their darkness to keep us from shining." The council chamber watched too. Broadcast law cut both ways. Delegates leaned toward their feeds, expressions set to disdain and cracking into something that resembled worry. A crystalline diplomat clicked involuntarily when a buoy refused to vanish. The amphibian with the translucent fins produced a wheeze unlisted in his people's etiquette manual. Humanity, Luna said on the open line, voice now aimed beyond Earth to any ear that had ever suspected the night of lying. Tonight we name new constellations. The dock hand's hook, the nurse's lamp, the mechanic's wrench, the grandmother's ring. Find your piece of sky. Call it by what kept you alive. Names erupted across the net. A kid in Manila declared the tricycle. A miner in Peru claimed the headlamp. A teacher in Lagos christened the open book. Luna laughed, pure and bright, and the sound braided into the flare so thoroughly the array would have had to erase her voice to kill the light. Empire craft inbound, Reyes warned, voice snapping back to the part of the night that had teeth. Interceptors from the lunar exclusion grid. 3. No. 5. Kindness, Luna murmured. Information. The interceptors dropped from the veil like black commas. The radiant shadow saw them and smiled with her engines. Luna's mouth did the same. She flipped the safety on a toggle etched with a lipstick kiss. GLITTERBOMB. Shall we dance, darlings? She asked the pilots, who couldn't hear and wouldn't have understood if they did. The first interceptor lunged. Luna rolled her ship in a move a flight examiner would have labeled flamboyantly ill-advised, and any decent poet would have called necessary. The glitter bomb canister popped behind her canopy and exploded into chaff that wasn't chaff, tiny mirrored confetti spinning slow enough to be legal and fast enough to be art. The array's sensors hiccuped. So did the interceptors. It shot at a Helen of Troy made of reflections and missed all 1,000 of her. The radiant shadow laughed in metal. 2 on your tail, Reyes said. Let them look, Luna said, and climbed. The interceptors followed and found what she wanted them to find. The grandmother's ring, a circle of buoys that had no business existing, glowing like a wedding band salvaged from a fire. Luna darted through the ring, kissed one buoy with her wingtip like a blessing, and shot outward. The interceptors tried to follow. One clipped a buoy and spun, its own systems arguing with what the night insisted it contained. Earth cheered. Bedrooms, bars, back porches. A grandmother in Accra lifted her own ring and tapped it against her window. That one's mine. She told no one, and everyone at once. The array smothered another chain of microflares, but it had to work for it. That was the point, to make inevitability pant. The comms savant fed Luna coordinates like love notes. If you can give me 10 seconds over the Southern Cross. Renamed, Luna said. Tonight it's the long-haul trucker. Then I can bounce this across their suppression field. What is this? Reyes asked, genuinely curious, even inside the jaw of danger. The savant grinned with teeth ringed by tiny rings. A lullaby. Luna took the radiant where she was asked to take her into another patch of forbidden, claimed, defended dark. The radiant shadow slid on her own reflection. The array's math slipped on her heels. Now, Luna said, and the savant pushed a song. It wasn't a lullaby for sleep. It was the kind you sing to a terrified child until terror decides to dance. It rode open channels, filtered through the last legal emergency frequencies left on Earth, and leaked through cracks in imperial doctrine. It named things, not the Empire's names. The names people used because they worked. The dockhand's hook hangs just above the nurse's lamp. You see it? And a little to the east is the mechanic's wrench. If you line up the wrench with the open book, you can point your window, your heart, north. North. The word steadied rooms. Luna, Reyes said softly, the council feed is rebroadcasting you live, whole spiral. Good, Luna said. Witnesses make things real. Radiant, the medic cut in. You're burning fuel faster than hope. You've got 5 minutes before you need to stop being poetry and start being prudent. Luna's smile turned sharp. Business under lipstick. Copy, Doctor. 5 minutes to steal a century. She pulled the ship into a shallow dive that pressed her spine to the seat with a lover's insistence. The cat-eye goggles filtered glare that did not exist to anyone else. The pearls lay cool against her throat. She was a poster girl you'd pin inside a locker and a revolutionary you'd follow into court, into hell, into orbit. 3 minutes later, the array blinked, only for a heartbeat, only like a man checking his reflection in a window as he walked past. But it blinked. "Did you see?" the mechanic began. "Yes," said 3 voices at once. A wedge of true starlight stabbed through the veil and died. But it had stabbed. Somewhere, a node had hiccuped. Somewhere, an algorithm had tripped on rhythm. Luna licked her lip, tasting heat and metal. "There," she said. "The seam." "We can't reach it in Act 1, Reyes said wryly. "Darling," Luna replied, "we don't win in Act 1, we promise." Her voice slid across the broadcast again, soft now, like a palm smoothing a wrinkle from a sheet. "To the spiral. You forgot something when you pulled the night down. We are not passengers of the stars. We are authors. You cut our stories from the sky, so we'll write louder. You call it order when you make things small. We call it life when we paint outside the lines." She banked the radiant shadow back toward Umbra. Her microflares burned in her wake, like champagne bubbles refusing to pop. The array reached to a race, busy hands finally made clumsy by the sheer impudence of a woman with pearls and a plan. Let it work. Let it sweat. "Luna," Reyes said, a smile in her voice she hadn't chosen but wouldn't give back. "Umbra is ready to receive." "Doc is lit." "Keep it dim," Luna said. "We're trying to make the dark jealous." The radiance slid into the hangar's mouth. Mag clamps caught her with a kiss. The deck shuddered as if the moon herself exhaled. The canopy popped. Air. Decent. Honest. Oxygen that hadn't signed a treaty with anyone. Washed her face. She tugged the goggles up. Her hair fell perfectly back into place, like it had been trained on a metronome. The lipstick hadn't smudged. Of course it hadn't. The hangar roared. "Reyes didn't." She stepped close. "You told them we'd paint stars with fire." "We did," Luna said. She tapped the comms rig with her cigarette holder. "And we will." "For navigation?" the medic asked, part hopeful, part triage. "For navigation," Luna said. She looked toward the open doors where vacuum pooled like ink. "For morale, for myth, for all the things the array thinks are luxuries and we know are lungs." She smiled sideways. "And for humiliation. Architects of order hate being made ridiculous." A tech in her first uniform lifted a hand, nervousness making her elbow hinge too fast. "Ma, Luna? If no species has ever risen again after the stars were veiled." Luna walked to her, heels kind on the deck now. She put 2 fingers under the girl's chin and raised it until their eyes met. "Then we won't rise," Luna said softly. "We'll ignite." Silence thickened with meaning. Somewhere, the array erased another flare. Somewhere, on Earth, a child drew a constellation in chalk on a sidewalk and named it after their mother. "Put this out across the feeds," Luna told the comms savant. To every species that still remembers being a species rather than a statistic, she faced the recorder. Her pearls shone like trophies of a battle that hadn't been fought yet but had already chosen its anthem. Her cigarette holder traced a little flourish in the air, then settled into a soldier's stillness. "When you cut our stars," Luna Starflare said, "you gave us a blank canvas. Humanity will light new ones with fire. We will paint until your dark runs out of hands." She let herself grin. "Art lessons over? Time for homework?" The feed cut with a sound like a kiss. Alarms stayed blessedly dormant. The hangar worked. "Reyes." Voice turned back to grit and schedules. The mechanic sang under his breath, something old and rude and perfect. The medic checked a bruise on Luna's wrist she hadn't noticed. The calm savant wept for a quiet 5 seconds, and then wiped her face with her sleeve and asked for coffee. Luna walked alone to the radiant shadow's nose and laid her gloved hand on the hull again. "Good girl," she murmured. "We'll make them blush." Over Earth's continents, windows opened as if a weather pattern had passed. People leaned out like flowers, turning toward a light that wasn't there and was everywhere. The array smothered flares in a rage so methodical it almost sounded like breathlessness. It had never had to hustle before. Nobody had ever made it. In the council chamber, the amphibian with translucent fins spoke into a dead mic. His voice did not carry. His eyes flicked to the crest, the gold wheel around the void. And for the first time, the void looked like a mouth trying not to show its teeth chattering. Back at Umbra, Reyes cleared her throat. "Luna," she said, we laughed in there. It felt illegal." "It was," Luna said. "It always is before it isn't." "Next?" Reyes asked. "Professional. Hungry. Next," Luna said, gaze going past the hangar doors to the seam she had felt in her bones rather than seen. "We make the array blink on purpose. But not tonight." She turned to the crew, to the cameras that were still illegally rolling, to the idea of Earth listening with its porch lights and its stubbornness. She straightened the line of her jacket, pearls steady, cat-eye goggles pushed back into her curls like a tiara she could forget she was wearing but never remove. Red mouth certain enough to replace the North Star. "Cliffhangers are rude," she said cheerfully, and the room laughed. "So I'll give you a promise instead. You will see new stars. You will name them, and when the Empire goes to erase them, they'll find we've set the sky on fire." She took one step toward the ladder. The radiant shadow waited like a black brush loaded with bright paint. "Let's prove it," Luna Starflare said. She climbed, the canopy sealed. The hangar's doors yawned like a theater's curtain after bows. The radiant shadow's engines answered the kind of night that thinks it can't be lit. The array listened, calculating, annoyed, and, for the first time, just a little unsure. Luna's heels clicked once against the pedal, like a signature on a declaration. The ship rolled forward into the dark. That chapter ended, not with stars restored, but with something heavier and more dangerous than light. Intention. The sky was still black, the array still holding its choke on the stars. But Earth had decided to answer. It began with graffiti. A dead satellite, nothing more than rusting panels and sputtering circuits, blinked alive with a burst of jazz. Its floodlights, meant for maintenance 3 wars ago, flared in Morse, 3 words scrawled across night. "Look up." Another satellite caught the signal and stuttered back, its own lights flickering until it spelled, "We're still here." On rooftops across the world, people gasped. For the first time since the stars vanished, there was something, anything, up there other than silence. The array smothered both satellites a heartbeat later, their lights cut like throats. But it was too late. The words had been seen. And they had been laughed at. Nervous, joyful, scandalized laughter that spread like a contagion. Luna Starflare leaned back in the radiant shadow's cockpit, cat-eye goggles glinting, red lips parted in a smirk. "Darlings," she purred over an open comm feed. "Shall we make the void jealous?" Her fleet, or rather the ragtag flotilla she'd bullied, charmed, and seduced into following her, rumbled ascent. A dozen patched interceptors, survey skiffs armed with nothing but stubbornness, old cargo haulers that looked like they'd wheeze apart if asked to do anything heroic. And yet, under her command, they were about to put on a show. The first salvo wasn't a battle, it was fireworks. Old nuclear warheads, disarmed of their terror and retooled with plasma packs, detonated in sequenced bursts. Not explosions. Flowers, blooms of red and violet plasma, curling against the black, then gold sparks, cascading like waterfalls. Then arcs of green that lingered as arcs across the void, weaving themselves into temporary constellations. Cities screamed with joy. In Rio, the sky lit carnival colors. In Kyoto, old temple bells rang without permission. In Lagos, entire blocks danced in the street, bodies pulsing to rhythms that matched the flare-time detonations overhead. The array tried to smother the lights, but plasma didn't obey as easily as starlight. For minutes at a time, Earth had its sky back, not the one it had lost, but one painted in fire. Luna leaned close to her canopy glass, lipstick-perfect smile glowing against the reflection. "That's your first lesson," she said to every ear tuned in, Earth or alien. "If they erase the heavens, we don't mourn, we redecorate." But she wasn't done. She never was. "Brush number 2, she announced, and the flotilla obeyed. Drones, once janitors of orbital junk, were reprogrammed with lipstick-coded instructions scrawled across their access panels. They woke and, obedient as dancers, began to paint graffiti across Imperial suppression buoys. The slogans were ridiculous, audacious, electric, "Your dark is boring. Chaos equals humanity. Kiss this." Every letter glowed in phosphor spray, every line a dare. The drones even sketched crude red lips across the golden sigils of the Empire, smearing order with mockery. Array suppression drones launched to respond. They came like locusts, sleek and silver, designed to devour light. Luna met them not with missiles but mirrors. She snapped open a compact the size of her palm, held it up to her canopy glass, and angled the reflection of her running lights. The drones, blind to context but obsessed with prediction, spun in confused loops, chasing phantoms of themselves. "Vanity saves lives," Luna quipped, blowing smoke against the canopy. The line, of course, was captured. It was always captured. History loves a mouth that knows its history. The next movement was jazz. Not metaphorical, but literal. Reyes piped Coltrane through the fleet's wideband comms, syncopated rhythms ricocheting across Imperial channels. The array's predictive AI, tuned to order, pattern, inevitability, stuttered. Algorithms designed for marches tripped on improvisation. Attack drones hesitated mid-flight. Beams intended to cut clean through buoys fired a fraction late, as if a saxophone solo had seduced them into missing the beat. Across Earth, people stopped being silent and started moving. Couples swung-danced in subway stations. Teenagers skateboarded down avenues with speakers strapped to their backs. Street musicians set up outside dead observatories, grinning as they joined the rebellion's impromptu soundtrack. And in the spiral, aliens leaned into screens they weren't supposed to be watching. A miner on a gas moon tapped his boot to human jazz. A smuggler's ship near Alpha Crucis blasted Luna's feed and found themselves laughing until tears floated free in their zero-G cockpit. Even in the Empire's heart, clerks whispered to one another after hours. The humans brought the stars back. But the array was not inert. It hated spectacle. It hated noise. Answered with escalation. Suppression drones darkened the skies over Earth, dropping dark bombs, spheres of engineered void that devoured all light around them. One swallowed an entire chain of plasma flares in a single gulp. Another erased a buoy that had glowed defiantly as the dockhands hooked. The void yawned wider. The spectacle risked collapse. And Luna laughed. Her laughter poured across every comm like champagne fizz. "Do you see, darlings? They throw shadow like confetti, and we throw it back louder." She ordered the fleet into chaos. Not retreat, not defense. Chaos. Flares detonated deliberately near bombs, turning suppression into fire halos. Drones flew in synchronized ripples, patterns that looked like improvisation but were timed to split suppression fire into impotent streams. The void was forced to chase them, forced to reveal how badly it wanted to win, and the harder it chased, the more ridiculous it looked. Earth gasped as a dark bomb swallowed a flare, then cheered when that swallowed flare bloomed brighter on the other side, like light refusing to stay obedient. "Despair is only fuel," Luna said, lounging in her seat as if this was cabaret. "Let it burn, and you'll find it cooks just fine. Her crew repeated it like catechism. Her enemies heard it like heresy. The galaxy, however, heard it like hope. By the time the second hour ended, the skies above Earth were not restored, but alive. Plasma blooms died, but others replaced them. Dark bombs swallowed, but graffiti reappeared. Every erasure forced a reinvention. It wasn't order, it wasn't victory, it was mess. It was resilience, it was humanity, and it was history. Every feed, every recorder, every transmission carried her last words of the night. Luna Starflare leaning into the comm, goggles reflecting fire that wasn't supposed to exist, lipstick perfect even against the void. "Darlings," she whispered, and the galaxy leaned closer. "If they erase the heavens, then we'll paint them back brighter." The Starveil Array hated noise, hated laughter, hated anything that wrinkled its perfect map of the night. It had been built to do what empires did best: subtract. It subtracted stars from sky, hope from lungs, myth from mouths. But subtraction, it turned out, had limits. It could not subtract Luna Starflare. The Array's guardians arrived in silence. 3 dreadnoughts blacker than the void, each lacquered in the Empire's wheel and void crest. They slid from behind the lightless rim where the Array hung in orbit around its power source. A collapsed star whose gravity bit space like teeth. Not a hole so much as a bruise in reality, ringed by a halo of stolen light. The overmind that ran the Array had chosen this well. No one sane fought here. "Hello, darlings." Luna purred. Cat-eye goggles pushed up into her glamorous blonde waves, smoke curling lazily from the corner of her red mouth. "I see you dressed for a funeral." "Which one?" Reyes asked from Nav, voice dry as vacuum. "Not ours." She flicked open her compact mirror, checked the flawless crimson of her lipstick, and snapped it shut like a gavel. The radiant shadow, sleek only if you squinted, held together by genius and gall, thrummed beneath her. The cockpit lights carved her cheekbones into bombshell angles. Pearls at her ears flashed like distant beacons. On her hip, the pencil skirt. On her sleeves, the subtle grease that said she wore glam-like armor you could work in. She looked like a pulp poster come to life. The kind empires laughed at once and never again. Sound check. The nervous officer, Ensign Cade, headphones crooked over a haircut he'd given himself with ship scissors, swallowed. "Captain, Event Horizon analysis confirms sheer gravitational shear. If we cross inside we get spaghettified," Luna finished cheerfully. "Delicious. I do love pasta." Griggs, the engineer, wheezed over ship-wide. "Lady, I've got 3 coolant lines praying to different gods, and 1 reactor that thinks it's a tambourine. Tell me this is a feint." "Everything I do is a feint," Luna said, lighting another slim cigarette. "Right up until it isn't." The dreadnoughts spread to bracket the collapsed star, 1 above, 2 below, forming a geometry whose meaning was simply no. The Overmind's voice rolled across every channel, metallic, priestly, smug. "Human celebrant, yield your signal. The Starveil has decided. Night is permanent." Luna smirked into the mic. "Night is only permanent if you're boring." The first volley came like a sermon, lances of annihilation stitched in perfect rhythm. Predictable, beautiful, murderous. "Match 3/4 swing," Luna said. "Reyes, catch the beat on the off." Cade yelped as the radiant shadow pivoted, her belly skimming the gravity-slicked edge of the haloed dark. The dreadnought beams hit the curvature of space and bent, graceless for the first time. Light itself dragged off tempo by the collapsed star's hunger. The volleys snarled around a place where up didn't mean anything and down meant everything. "Gods of guidance," Cade whispered. "We're surfing a black hole." "Language," Luna chided. "We're waltzing." The first move of the ballet was debris. All the junk a dead century had flung into space. Broken trusses, shivered panels, fossil satellites, hung in ragged orbits around the Array's machine cathedral. Other captains saw obstacles. Luna saw brushes. Griggs, she said, heels clicking like metronomes against the deck as she rose just enough to lean into the forward glass. Cigarette, a comet tail between two fingers. Magnetize the graveyard. Give me a sweep on my mark. You're gonna sling junk at dreadnought armor? Griggs coughed a laugh. I like it. Not at them, Luna said. Around them. The radiant shadow fired a pulse through her scavenged magnetics. The cloud of derelict metal shivered as one, then slurred sideways. An arc of wreckage traced a glittering crescent across the warped light of the Black Star's lens. Not a weapon, at least, not to the dreadnoughts. To every camera aimed their way across the spiral, though, it was unmistakable. The first brushstroke. Palette test, Luna murmured. Lovely. The dreadnoughts adjusted course to keep formation between the radiant shadow and the array. Their precision took longer here. Every movement had to solve for gravity that forgot to behave. Leftmost Guardian is overcorrecting, Reyes said, tapping syncopated patterns on his console. Its nav is fighting lensing delay. Predictable, Luna said. Let's untie their shoelaces. The radiant shadow sneaked a burst of jazz into the dreadnought's command wideband. Muted trumpet, lazy and lethal as a smile. The predictive AI hesitated, eyes on a rhythm that refused to repeat, and the dreadnought drifted just a hair wide. Now, Luna purred. They dove. The radiant shadow slid under the dreadnought's belly, close enough that Cade could see the scarring, where Imperial clerks had polished the crest into unnatural gloss. Gravity tried to yank the cruiser down and tear her spine in two. Luna rode the feeling with her body, a dancer catching a too ardent partner and spinning him anyway. Griggs, she sang. Conga. Conga? Here? Griggs sputtered. Lady, that's a ripple formation, not a, oh, what the hell. Conga it is. The stolen ships Luna had gathered, scouts, skiffs, cargo tugs, manned by cooks and poets and pilots who'd rather die flamboyantly than live quietly, fanned into staggered engine bursts, rippling fire like a ribbon over the dreadnought's flank. The ripple caught the dreadnought's shield harmonics on the wrong beat. Not a breach, but a blush. Aye! Cade's voice broke into laughter. We made a dreadnought stutter. Darling, Luna said, red mouth crooked. Wait until we make it dance. The array answered with suppression buoys, a forest of black spines coughing dark, space where light could not be coaxed into existing. They fell toward the fleet like thumbtacks tipped in hunger. Party trick, Luna said. Confetti. Flares dozens, spun from her ships in blooming fans. Not random. Never random. The plumes blasted straight into the pockets of deadness and lit their borders a toxic violet. The voids remained voids. But their edges glowed where the flares died, and suddenly the fleet had outlines, not guesses. If you could see the edge of nothing, you could dodge it. Draw, Luna said, and Reyes set them sketching again. Ion trails whistling across the night like chalk strokes on blackboard sky. Captain, Cade breathed, eyes wet to spite himself as the lines accumulated into suggestion. Are we? Yes, Luna said, tipping ash into a silver tray. We're going to write our names where God forgot to leave any. The dreadnoughts tried brute force again, because empires always return to it when embarrassed. Their next volleys came not as sermon but as rage, sloppy by empire standards, which meant merely beautiful instead of surgical. Beams carved arcs around the collapsed star's warped throat. Two crossed and interfered, made scalloped petals of obliteration. Luna watched the petal shape, filed it, smiled. Brush 3, she said. Plasma ribbon, cargo tugs. Those brick-simple workhorses. Vomited ropes of ionized gas, pulled taut between paired thrusters like streamers between parade floats. Against the black, they were tendrils of molten silk. Gravity taught those ribbons new ways to curve. Luna taught those curves to become handwriting. She leaned toward her mic. Spiral, look up. Orion came first. Not Orion exactly. No star could be where there were none. But Muscle remembered myth even when eyes had nothing to hold. A triple knot of fire for the belt. A shoulder, a sword, a raised arm captured in plasma strokes as fat and arrogant as a god's. The dreadnoughts tried to swallow it with darkness. The plasma obeyed gravity more than logic and merely bent, then glowed in a way that made the figure look like it was turning to look over its shoulder. Earth howled from Johannesburg rooftops and Saskatchewan farmlands, from Beijing alleys and little boats on the Adriatic. People screamed and clapped and kissed strangers and slapped the hems of their coats and shouted at the night like the night could hear. Children pointed with sticky fingers. Elders cried without being ashamed. Someone started singing a stupid camp song about constellations, and the tune caught the way panic catches, only backwards. In the fringe, an entire mining barge cut power to watch the illegal feed, their captain wiping his eyes with one grimy knuckle and refusing to explain himself. In a prefecture where laughter had been taxed for 300 years, clerks gathered in a maintenance shaft to look at contraband hollows, hands over mouths. They made Orion. One whispered, "How?" The answer, all the more dangerous for being simple, was by daring to try. The Overmind's voice spoke like thunder dragged slowly across metal. "Art is no shield, darling." Luna purred back. "It's a sword with better manners." The second figure she sketched was Cassiopeia, a vanity of a queen. 5 points of fire strung into a W, only this time the W bent like a coy smile hiding knives. The third was older than any myth of the empires, the Milky Way, not as a band of billions, but as a river. Here is how you draw a river when the sky is a mouth. You blow dust where engines have broken rock to flour, and then you set the flour on fire. Slow, gentle, patient as a baker. The cargo ships puffed asteroid dust in long exhalations. Flares pursued, turning each exhale to a smear of silver. The collapsed star grabbed the smear and pulled it into an arc. A second smear joined from the opposite side, then a third, and it looked sloppy until suddenly it looked inevitable. "Milk," Luna said softly, seeing the meaning before it solidified. "Pour it." The ribbon bent. The arcs met. The river shone. Every camera caught the moment, like the moment was alive and performing for them. Every feed echoed with crowds who had forgotten how to be crowds without fear. "Look up!" someone shouted in Nairobi. 1,000 voices answered in 1,000 tongues. "Look up!" The dreadnoughts came through the river like sharks, ugly with intent. "Mic drop," Luna said. Her jammers hit the dreadnought net like a comedian whose timing was truly merciless. Predictive matrices tried to find order in the applause and lost track of the show. One dreadnought fired into its sister's wake. Another bled power into countering a threat that was a whispered joke about a threat. It would have been farcical if it were to step from killing them all. Cade's hands trembled. "Captain, they're adapting." "Of course they are," Luna said. "Good villains always do." "Reyes, take us to the lip." "You want to ride the event horizon?" Reyes asked, thrilled and horrified. "I want to kiss it," Luna said, and grinned. They dove again. The collapsed star's rim was not a place for ships. It was a place for physics to admit it was tired. Gravity pulled like a tide that had forgotten it was water. The radiant shadow shivered as structural alarms chewed the air. "Captain," Griggs rasped, "I've got bolts riding their will." "Tell them to leave me cigarettes," Luna said, "and trust their bones." She brought the ship so close to the black that Cade swore he saw time shiver. He blinked, and it was fine again, except his hands remembered being old for a second. The dreadnoughts dared the same, because empires mistake bravery for symmetry. They came hot. They came self-assured. They came into the place where everything that thought it knew how to move had to learn again. "Brush 4, Luna said very softly. "Shadow." They cut power for 3 entire heartbeats. The radiant shadow, named not for brightness, but for the trick of surviving behind impossible lights, went dark. No thrusters, no beacons, not even the polite stippling of navigation. In normal space, suicide. Near a black star, there was no normal space. The ship slid along the rim like a dancer who briefly trusted the floor not to be there. Gravity, indulgent for one breathtaking instant, let her keep her dress clean. The dreadnoughts overshot. "On!" Luna said, smiling so hard her lipstick almost cracked, and then, because it never cracked, didn't. The engines flared back, and for the length of a synced cymbal crash, the radiant shadow was not where the dreadnoughts needed her to be. Left Guardian exposed, between shield cycles, Reyes said, something like awe breaching his professionalism. "Captain, we can nick them." "Not nick," Luna said. "Etch." The fleet's salvage tugs had been dragging a lattice of truss behind them like tinsel shed by war. Luna signaled. The tugs released. The lattice, already hot with plasma and bent by gravity in ways no engineer alive loved, slid neatly across the dreadnought's forward flank. Every camera saw it. Every schoolchild one day would sketch it on a napkin. Every archivist would sigh and admit that, deny it though they might, it was art. Across the dreadnought's armor, sizzling in violet fire, glowed a shape no Imperial could laugh off. A 5-pointed star. Cade whooped, an honest, terrified, delirious sound. "We branded them." "You gave a cathedral a tattoo," Griggs said, coughing through a laugh. The dreadnought screamed in machine rage and tried to shake the star off, as if paint could be offended into erasing itself. The array spat a flurry of dark bombs, impatient. The Overmind's voice sharpened, the sermon's cadence cracking to show the metal underneath. "You are children." "Darling," Luna said to the Overmind, "we brought the canvas." Then she stole the background. Here is the trick no one had quite guessed. The array didn't generate darkness. It organized it. It told scattered absorbers where to stand and how to hold their breath. Luna didn't need more light to ruin it. She needed worse shadows. "Reyes," she said, "release the kites." The kites were laughable when she proposed them, burst balloons of reflective aerogel, no heavier than a hero's promise. They'd been packed into cargo bays like party favors, painted on one side with a mirror film, on the other with phosphor. Released into the war weather, caught by the collapsed star's wind of gravity, they swam outward, dancing like ghosts. They did two things at once. They reflected just enough plasma to turn the void's own border into a glowing sketch of itself, and they caught beam spill from the dreadnoughts and threw it sideways, messy, vulgar, magnificent. The array's tidy geometry of night fell into crosshatch and smudge. From Earth, from the fringe, from alien worlds where children had learned to tell stories in which darkness had won, the sky suddenly looked human, imperfect, layered, worked by hand. "More," Luna said, and her fleet obeyed because fear had been taught to grin. The debris cloud became bristles, the plasma ribbons became paint. Their orbits, once a prayer in numbers, became a dance. The Black's brutal tug became partner, not master. They drew Scorpius, curled, arrogant, and someone in Rio shouted the name like a dare. They drew the Southern Cross, and old sailors wept in port bars whose roofs still leaked from sea spray. They drew, best of all, an outline of the galaxy itself, not the precise sweep of astronomers, but a lover's tracing of a spine under a sheet. The Milky Way arched, smudged and full of fire. Even the Overmind's cameras couldn't help it. They captured beauty against its will. "Captain," Cade said, laughter now in his fear like sugar in coffee. "This is madness." She leaned into the comm. "Spiral," she said, voice a low purr that made translators earn their pay and then some. "We are not pulling down heaven to prove we can," she went on. We are building a scaffold to climb out of a hole someone else dug. We are lighting matches in the mouth of the night until the night forgets it had teeth. She lifted her compact, tilted it so the light off Orion's belt glinted across her cheek and looked like a promise. If you are somewhere you can see, look up. And if you are somewhere you cannot, close your eyes. I swear you'll still see it on the backs of your lids. She clicked the compact shut and smiled like mischief carved out of mercy. Brush 5. Signature. The fleet had learned the moves. Now it learned a flourish that should not have been possible anywhere, much less here. The radiant shadow pulled a tight loop that would have snapped her spine if Griggs hadn't bullied the reactor back into temper. Skiffs crossed her wake and left 3 quick kisses of fire where her path curved. Tugs tugged dust where it needed to drift an inch left. Kites glittered. Jazz howled. Across the face of the array's holy dark, in lipstick red and phosphor silver, loomed one vast human word. Hello. The Overmind howled without sound. Its dreadnoughts answered with incompetent fury. The array flooded its fields. Shadows lunged. The constellations frayed at the edges. The river smeared. Orion became a rumor of a shoulder. Hello dissolved as if written in water. It's okay, Luna said softly, half to Cade and half to the continent of hearts beating in time with his. Ephemerality is part of the show. It hurts, Cade said, not ashamed. It's supposed to, Luna said. That's how we remember, the array buckled. Only for a heartbeat, a hiccup and a god. But every system screamed it. The dark, so smug a moment before, shivered at its perimeter. 1,000 suppression buoys flickered, as if something had asked them a question they did not know how to answer. The Overmind's voice glitched a syllable, then found it, and tried to pretend it hadn't. You will, KNE, Luna laughed. It wasn't mockery, it was recognition. Different sermon, sweetheart. We've heard that one. The dreadnoughts regrouped for a final pass. The array dimmed everything that wasn't them, and made the black so thick it felt like velvet pressed over a face. The Overmind's logic stopped trying to classify and started trying to crush. Reyes, Luna said, voice a blade wrapped in silk. Take us to the lip one last time. Reyes did, without asking why, because the answer would either be genius or madness, and in either case you didn't interrupt. The radiant shadow skimmed the rim, her frame keening as space itself pulled at her rivets like a jealous lover. Cade's breath fogged his canopy. He drew a star in it with his pinky without realizing. Griggs, Luna said, I'm going to need every cheap trick you've got. I've got a whole dollar store, Griggs said. Pick something. Give me a reactor cough on 2, then a heartbeat of overburn on 4. That'll cook us to a pretty medium rare. I shine under good lighting. She leaned into the comm one last time, not to the galaxy, but to a machine. Listen closely, darling Overmind. You think unpredictability is error. It's composition. You think laughter is waste. It's a weapon that sharpens with use. You think a woman in pearls can't rewrite your sky. She smiled, the kind that sold revolutions. Watch me, too, Griggs said, and the radiant shadow coughed. Fell a fraction, just enough to make the dreadnought lunge with greedy engines. 4, Griggs said, strangled, and the ship kicked upward on a burst that had no right to be there. The dreadnought overshot into the place where gravity forgot its manners. The array reached to save it. For a machine that claimed order as liturgy, mercy was a sin. In performing it, the Overmind broke its own rhythm. Fields misaligned. 1,000 tiny columns on 1,000 meta-ledgers failed to sum to 0. The edge of darkness creased. It was not a crack, not yet, just a crease, the thing paper does when it realizes it can be folded into something else. Every watcher knew it. Every crew on Luna's fleet felt the ship hum, with the sound of a tide turning where no water lived. Cade laughed and sobbed all at once. Reyes swore into his sleeve like it was private prayer. Griggs shouted, "Ha!" and smacked a spar, as if congratulating an old mule. The Overmind's voice came one last time. peeled clean of sermon and left with nothing but promise. Human, you turned my dark into a canvas. I will turn your canvas into ash. Luna sat back, smoke winding around her hair like a laurel. Her lipstick was still perfect. Her pearls still winked. She looked, in the wash of instruments and ghostlight, like a queen who had refused the crown and stolen the stage. "Schedule my makeup," she said, as if she had some place to be besides the end of the world. "We're going to need a brighter red." The radiant shadow angled her nose toward the black star, toward the array, toward the humiliation she intended to make permanent. The fleet tightened around her, ragged, elegant, fearless, because fear had been taught to wear heels and laugh. All across the spiral, in kitchens and bars and loading docks and palaces, beings looked up at a night they had been told belonged to someone else and whispered it together. "Look up." The array dimmed the last of the fire with stubborn hands. The dark returned, sullen. Somewhere in that dark, however, a crease remembered. It would not forget. Cliffhanger. In the silence that followed, the overmind did not switch off. It sharpened, and in a voice stripped of liturgy and left with nothing but promise, it said on every frequency, "Earth, I will crush your laughter." Luna smiled, bright as a match struck in a theater. "Darling," she said, and her voice purred across the void. "We're just getting to the chorus." The radiant shadow skimmed the lip of the void, battered, smoking, trembling in every rib of her frame. Around her, wreckage turned slow cartwheels, still glowing from the fury of the battle. The array loomed, a cathedral of subtraction, wires of darkness braided through the collapsed star. It should have been untouchable. It should have been forever. And yet it wavered. "Captain," Reyes rasped, sweat running down his temple. "The Overmind's grid is folding in on itself. Too many contradictions. It can't reconcile chaos." "Of course it can't," Luna Starflare said, her red lips curving into a smile as precise as a blade. She stood tall on the bridge, pearls catching the guttering light, her pencil skirt still immaculate, despite the ship shaking around her. She looked like she'd just stepped onto stage for an encore, not fought the most impossible battle in history. The Overmind's voice cracked across the comms, jagged as broken glass. "Human, you erase nothing, you only." Static devoured the last word. Luna raised her cigarette holder like a maestro's baton. "Darlings," she said to her fleet, to Earth, to the spiral itself, "it's time to finish our sky opera." The command was simple, impossible, and utterly her. Every ship, every satellite, every stolen buoy or half-dead drone they had dragged behind them would light at once. Not as weapons, but as notes in a symphony. Synchronized detonation grids. Reyes barked, and voices across the fleet echoed, terrified and exultant. One by one, warheads primed. Not aimed at the array itself, though plenty would bite there, but set in a choreography of ignition. On Luna's signal, the darkness exploded. It wasn't chaos. It was composition. Fire painted itself across the void in arcs that bent like brushstrokes, igniting debris into comets, satellites into jeweled sparks. Whole frigates, stripped bare and set adrift, burned out in white blossom flares. The collapsed star's lens warped the lights into ribbons, smearing them into shapes more familiar than fear. Constellations. Orion. Cassiopeia. The Southern Cross. The Milky Way itself, stitched together from wreckage and flame. Earth's sky. Stolen once, now reborn. On the ground, billions looked up. Children screamed joy into the night. Elders pressed hands to their hearts. Lovers kissed under fire-made stars. In alien prefectures where laughter was rationed, whole crowds sobbed openly. Smugglers, miners, poets, priests, everywhere, they shouted one thing: "Look up!" The array screamed. Its fields buckled, twisted inward, unable to swallow what refused to die. The collapsed star belched arcs of light where no light should live. The cathedral of subtraction shivered, cracked, and folded into itself. The Starveil Array collapsed under its own logic, undone not by brute force but by audacity, by the refusal to let the dark have the last word. Luna inhaled smoke, exhaled slow, and watched the ruins scatter into the black. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. "Captain," Cade whispered, voice trembling with awe. "The stars, they're back." "Not enough," Luna said. Her eyes glinted, sly and merciless. "We need a signature." She keyed the fleet's last reserves. Plasma arcs bent again. Wreckage aligned one final time. And in the black above, glowing against the backdrop of restored constellations, appeared a new figure. A star figure. A woman, head thrown back in laughter, hair ablaze, arms outstretched like she was dancing with the universe. Her outline burned across the heavens, radiant and defiant, unmistakable. Luna Starflare. The signature constellation hung there, mocking the Empire, inspiring the spiral, telling every frightened world the same story in one incandescent gesture. They cut the stars, and the humans painted them back. The comms officer whispered it before he even knew he was recording. "They'll never erase her now." The bridge went quiet, just the creak of cooling metal, the hum of systems bleeding down from overload. Darla Star might have stolen ships. Vera Vortex might have ridden black holes. Zara Zenith might have walked through citadels. But this was Luna's legend, her name carved not into stone, but into fire, where no empire could touch it. All across the spiral, defectors whispered to one another. The humans laughed, and the dark lost. The Overmind's voice flickered one last time, stripped of grandeur, hollow as static. "This is not." Then silence. Luna smiled faintly, lit another cigarette, and let the ember glow like a tiny star in her hand. "Darling," she said to no one in particular, "of course it is." And in pulp cadence, the narrator closed. And so Luna Starflare carved her name in fire across the heavens, proving that the sharpest weapon in the universe is not steel, nor order, nor thrones, but the refusal to let the dark win.